It's a Tuesday morning in January 2006. The kind of morning that blends into every other weekday. The alarm goes off, coffee brews, cars pull out of parking lots and onto familiar roads. People are thinking about meetings, deadlines, traffic. Nothing about the day feels remarkable. In Orlando, Florida, a 24-year-old woman is starting her routine. She's done this countless times before. She wakes up, she showers, she gets dressed, she lays out clothes, deciding what feels right for the day ahead. Her condo is quiet, safe, and familiar. This is a life that finally feels settled. She locks her door and heads out, expecting to be gone for the day and back again that evening. This is the mundane part of life, the unordinary. The walk to the car, the drive to work, the same stretch of time between home and office that most people never think twice about. But somewhere between her front door and where she's supposed to be next, the tone shifts. No one hears a struggle. No one sees an encounter. No clear line marking when the day stops being normal. Within hours, a panic begins to spread. Phone calls go unanswered. A routine breaks. A family realizes something isn't right. And in the 20 years that follow, that quiet Tuesday morning will become one of the most examined stretches of time in Florida history, measured in minutes, revisited in fragments, and defined by everything that can't be explained. This is the story of what happened to Jennifer Kesse, pronounced Kesse. On the morning of January 24, 2006, Jennifer Kesse didn't show up to work. She also missed an important meeting. That alone was enough to raise concern. Jennifer was reliable. She showed up. She followed through. She called if she was going to be late. When hours passed with no word from her, the silence started to feel wrong. At around 11 a.m., Jennifer's employer, who also happened to be a close friend of her parents, called Drew and Joyce Kesse to ask if they knew where their daughter was. They didn't. The Kesses tried to reach Jennifer immediately. They called her cell phone. It wasn't that there was no answer, the call went straight to voicemail. Jennifer had gotten that phone when she was 16. It had never gone to voicemail before. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't a missed meeting. It wasn't a busy morning. It wasn't Jennifer forgetting to call. Something wasn't right. Drew and Joyce got in the car and started the 2-hour drive to Orlando, bringing Jennifer's brother Logan with them. As they drove, they kept calling. Friends, hospitals, Jennifer's boyfriend, anyone they could think of. No one had seen her. No one had heard from her. Then they contacted the head of maintenance at Jennifer's condo complex and asked him to check one specific thing: whether Jennifer's car was parked in its assigned space. When he said it wasn't, they asked him to go inside her condo. He agreed and brought another employee with him. Jennifer wasn't there either. Inside, everything looked normal. Nothing appeared disturbed. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken doors. No broken windows. Nothing suspicious. No obvious reason to be concerned. When Drew, Joyce, and Logan arrived in Orlando, they went straight to Jennifer's condo. Inside, they could tell that Jennifer had slept in her bed. She had taken a shower. She had blow-dried her hair. There were clothes laid out clearly deciding what to wear to work that morning. Her car, however, was still gone. So were her phone, her keys, her purse, and her iPod. Based on everything they were seeing, and what they knew about Jennifer, her family believed she likely left the condo intending to go to work sometime between 7:30 and 7:45 a.m. that morning. What happened after that was unknown. There were a lot of unanswered questions, but one fact was undeniable. 24-year-old Jennifer Kesse was missing. Her parents contacted police and asked for an officer to meet them at the condo to take a missing person report. An officer did arrive that afternoon. But according to Jennifer's family, the response felt dismissive. Drew later said, "He just laughed and said, She probably got in a fight with her boyfriend and went to blow off steam. But her parents knew that wasn't Jennifer's style. With little sense of urgency coming from law enforcement, Jennifer's family began organizing their own search. By around 4 p.m., Jennifer's boyfriend Rob and several friends had gathered at the condo. It became an informal command center. Flyers were printed, people spread out to canvass the area. Neighbors were asked if they'd heard or seen anything unusual, but no one had. Jennifer's brother began approaching construction workers at the complex, asking if anyone had seen her that morning. At the time, the complex was being converted from apartments into condos. Construction crews were everywhere, but no one would talk to him. No one would answer his questions. As the day wore on, there was still no sign of Jennifer, and still no meaningful help from the police. That evening, local news outlets began reporting on her disappearance. Public attention, and the persistence of Jennifer's loved ones, started to apply pressure. An investigation was finally opened. But for days, there were no leads. This is the part of the story where families start doing the job they never should have to do. They become the detectives, the search coordinators, the publicists. They trade their own peace of mind for the slim chance of finding an answer. And for the Kesses, this was only the beginning of a fight that would span 2 decades. So what happened to Jennifer Kesse? The answer may be hidden in the details of her last 24 hours and a series of troubling incidents that preceded her disappearance. Jennifer had everything going for her. She was a strong, fun-loving, career-minded, and responsible young woman. A 2003 graduate with a finance degree, she had already earned enough money and respect to buy her own condo in a gated community called the Mosaic at Millenia, located in a busy area near the mall at Millenia in Orlando. She'd recently been promoted to finance manager at Central Florida Investments, a timeshare company. In the days before her disappearance, Jennifer seemed to be on top of the world. She and her boyfriend of about a year, Rob Allen, had just returned from a weekend trip to St. Croix. Their relationship was long distance, with Rob living about 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale, but they made it work, visiting each other frequently. Her mother, Joyce, recalled that Jennifer was in love and that the trip was a wonderful escape for the couple. On Monday, January 23, 2006, Jennifer drove back to Orlando from Fort Lauderdale, arriving around 9 a.m., and went straight to work. That day, she was full of life, calling her mother to share every detail about the trip. She was on a cloud, Joyce later remembered. Jennifer also called her brother and her father that afternoon, sharing the joy of her recent vacation. That evening, after work, Jennifer went home to her condo at the Mosaic at Millenia. She made several phone calls to family and friends, checking in and sharing more stories about her vacation. The last call she would ever make was to her boyfriend, Rob, around 10 p.m. It did not go well. The long distance was taking a toll on their relationship, and they had a disagreement. It was a small crack in an otherwise happy narrative, but nothing that would suggest the tragedy to come. During that final phone call, Jennifer mentioned something that, in hindsight, would become deeply unsettling. She told Rob that she had heard a knock on her door late that night. She had not answered it. She was cautious. She was careful. But she was also a young woman living alone in a condo complex where she had previously felt uneasy. She brushed it off, but the knock on her door that night remains a chilling detail. She went to sleep with her condo locked, likely reassured by the security of a gated community. She had no way of knowing that this was the last time she would ever rest in her own bed. The next morning, January 24, 2006, Jennifer Kesse vanished. Her family and friends were the first to notice. Rob didn't get his usual good morning text or call from Jennifer. He tried to reach her and couldn't, leaving messages, assuming she was busy with work. It wasn't until Jennifer's employer called her parents that a real alarm was sounded. The scene inside her condo suggested that Jennifer had gotten ready for work as usual. Her pajamas were on the floor. There was makeup all over her counter. Her shower was still wet. She had used her blow dryer, leaving the tools out. Everything pointed to a normal morning. She had left her condo, locking the door behind her, taking only her purse, keys, cell phone, and iPod. But the car was gone, and she was nowhere to be found. 2 days later, on January 26th, a crucial discovery was made. A viewer of a local news report about Jennifer's disappearance recognized her black Chevy Malibu. It was found abandoned in the parking lot of another condo complex, Huntington on the Green, about a mile away from Jennifer's home. There was a spark of hope. It was a tangible clue. But that hope was short-lived. The car was locked. There was no sign of Jennifer. Nothing had been stolen, and there was no evidence of a struggle inside the vehicle. Her personal belongings, phone, purse, iPod, were never found. But the car gave investigators something more important: security footage. From the Huntington on the Green complex, a surveillance camera captured a person parking Jennifer's car. The timestamp showed it was around noon on the day she disappeared, several hours after she would have left for work. The person sat in the car for about 30 seconds, then got out and walked away. This was the first and, for a long time, the only image of a person of interest in the case. It was a grainy, frustrating image. The camera took a photo every few seconds, and in each frame, the person's face was obstructed by a fence post. They appeared to be wearing work clothes, possibly painter's whites. The person was described as a man around 5 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 5 inches tall, with unusually large feet for his height. They had what appeared to be long hair, possibly tied back. To make matters worse, the security footage from Jennifer's own condo complex was incomplete. The Mosaic at Millennia had security cameras, but they had not yet been installed or were not functioning properly at the time. There was no video record of Jennifer leaving her home that morning. There was also no record of anyone entering or leaving the complex's gated entrance that morning, nor was there a log of Jennifer's car leaving. The security system, which should have provided a clear trail, offered nothing. The police investigation seemed to stall almost immediately, but Jennifer's family refused to let the case go cold. They moved into her condo to be close to the investigation. They pored over every detail of the case, trying to piece together the moments that led to her disappearance. And then a detail from Jennifer's past began to emerge, a detail that her family had initially brushed aside, but now seemed deeply ominous. Jennifer had complained to her parents and friends about the construction workers at the Mosaic at Millennia. The complex was undergoing major renovations, converting apartments into condos. Workers were everywhere. Jennifer had told them the workers made her feel uncomfortable. She said they would stop and stare when she walked to her car. She described it as a persistent, unsettling feeling of being watched. She just said, "There's a lot of workers here and they tend to stop when I'm walking to my car. And they just look," Drew Kesse recalled. One of the key details that emerged from the investigation was that a set of master keys to the complex had been stolen a month before Jennifer's disappearance. This was a chilling revelation, suggesting that someone had the means to access not only the common areas but perhaps the individual units themselves. In addition, there were incomplete security records from the condominium complex, including a lack of security footage because many cameras had not yet been installed. The complex's main security gate, which should have been recording vehicles entering and leaving, also had incomplete records. It was a perfect storm of negligence, leaving a gaping hole in the timeline and the evidence. The theory that a construction worker was responsible for Jennifer's disappearance became the most persistent and viable lead. According to private investigator Michael Toretta, who was later hired by the Kesses. Up to 10 construction workers were living in a vacant apartment directly across from Jennifer's unit. They were not tenants with leases, but transient workers who were using the empty units as crash pads. This created a volatile, unmonitored environment where a person could easily observe Jennifer's comings and goings without being noticed. Toretta, working alongside the Kesses, uncovered that Jennifer wasn't the only woman who felt uneasy around these workers. He spoke to at least 6 other female residents of the complex who had similar experiences. One woman, named Colleen, recalled feeling uncomfortable walking past groups of men who would drink outside and make comments. She and others described it as a pervasive sense of unease. The investigation, with this newfound focus, started to bring forward a specific name, Chino. According to a former housekeeper at the complex, the man in the surveillance photo resembled a maintenance worker known as Chino. The housekeeper noted his hair, his clothing, and the way he walked. Chino was one of the workers who had done repairs in Jennifer's condo about a week before her disappearance. He was also identified in an anonymous crime line tip from the first week of the investigation. Detective Joel Wright, who became the lead investigator around 6 months after Jennifer disappeared, tracked Chino down in 2009. Chino was in prison on an unrelated statutory rape charge. On March 18, 2009, Wright interviewed him. Chino admitted he had been in Jennifer's apartment to do work and claimed everything was normal. He gave a statement saying he had no idea what happened to her. He also took a polygraph test. He passed, but even though the suspect passed a lie detector test, the Kesses and their investigators remained skeptical. They questioned the reliability of polygraphs and the depth of the police investigation into Chino and the other construction workers. They also discovered that many of the construction workers who were in the complex had left the area almost immediately after Jennifer's disappearance. They vanished back to their homes, making them nearly impossible to track down. The case dragged on for years. Detective Wright was reassigned in 2010. Frustration grew. In 2016, 10 years after Jennifer vanished, she was declared dead by the state of Florida. "That was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life," Drew Kesse said. But declaring her dead was not the same as giving up. The Kesses continued to fight. In December 2018, they took the unprecedented step of suing the Orlando Police Department for a copy of Jennifer's case files. They wanted to see everything. They wanted to conduct their own investigation. After months of legal proceedings, a settlement was reached in March 2019. OPD handed over more than 16,000 pages of documents, along with 67 hours of video and audio tape. Under the agreement, the Orlando Police Department would no longer lead the investigation. The Kesses then hired private investigator Michael Toretta to sift through the massive archive of information. Toretta, with fresh eyes, uncovered a lead that had been buried in the files. About 10 months after Jennifer disappeared, an eyewitness reported seeing a person dumping a rolled-up piece of carpet into a lake near Jennifer's home. This was significant because, on the day of Jennifer's disappearance, workers were laying carpet in the apartment directly across the hall from Jennifer's. Could the carpet be evidence? In November 2019, a dive team was dispatched to search the lake. They spent 2 days combing the murky waters, but they found nothing. It was another dead end, another piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. The case, despite the family's relentless efforts, grew colder. For almost 20 years, there were no named suspects, no arrests, and no answers. The grainy image of the person parking her car remained the most important clue, a phantom figure that haunted the investigation. Even NASA was brought in to enhance the surveillance footage, but the face behind the fence remained invisible. Then, in October 2025, a new development emerged that offered a glimmer of hope. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, which had taken over the investigation in 2022, informed the Kesses that they had found DNA on evidence that had never been tested before. This was a bombshell. After 19 years of silence, there was new forensic evidence. Drew Kesse told the Daily Mail that the FDLE had told them the case was no longer cold. The investigation was going 1,000 miles an hour, and it was all starting to make sense. The Kesses had shared their own DNA with law enforcement to help with the investigation. Artificial intelligence was also being deployed to analyze the evidence. The FDLE confirmed that they had a short list of persons of interest and were methodically pursuing leads, analyzing evidence, and conducting interviews. Drew Kesse didn't know exactly where the DNA came from, but he suspected it was from a marking on the hood of Jennifer's car that his private investigator had discovered earlier, a mark that looked like it could have been from a struggle. The discovery of this DNA, and the new energy behind the investigation, gave the Kesses fresh hope that the person who took their daughter might finally be found. As of January 2026, the FDLE continues to actively investigate the case. Agents have conducted over 115 interviews, reviewed tens of thousands of documents, and spent thousands of hours re-examining the investigation. The Kesses are working with a production company to create a documentary on Jennifer's story, hoping that renewed public attention might generate the critical tip needed to solve the case. Jennifer's family is holding on to that hope, but it's a painful, bitter hope. They have spent 2 decades of their lives fighting for answers. Drew and Joyce have poured their savings, their time, and their emotional health into finding their daughter. "The hole in our heart is forever there until we have an answer," Joyce Kesse said. They are older now, and the constant stress has taken its toll. They know they might never see their daughter again, but they are determined to find out what happened to her. "We could get to the end of the line and they come to us and say, 'We did everything, but we didn't find your daughter and she's gone.' We can accept that. It would be hard, but we could accept that because we know they did everything," Drew Kesse said. Jennifer Kesse was a 24-year-old woman with a promising future, a woman who was happy, in love, and building a life for herself. She was a finance manager, a daughter, a sister, a girlfriend. She was a person who got up on a Tuesday morning, expecting to go to work, not realizing she was walking into a trap. And then, she vanished into thin air. The identity of the person in that surveillance footage, the person who parked her car and walked away, remains a mystery. Was it Chino, one of the construction workers? Someone else entirely? The new DNA evidence is the best chance the family has had in 2 decades to get answers. But it is a race against time. The story of Jennifer Kesse is a story of a family's unending love and their refusal to give up. It is a story of a system that failed them, of evidence that vanished, and of a community that will not forget. It is a story about a young woman's life that was cut short, and the enduring, heartbreaking question of what happened in those lost moments on a Tuesday morning.